Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
All right, what a difference 1 week makes. We joked, we laughed at the end of last week's episode saying, what if the Vikings win their next 2 games? And we talk about the Vikings being buyers. Well, the Vikings did win their next 2 games since we've last talked on Purple Daily on Draft right here every Monday on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. But they lost the most important position and player in football, on their football team, I should say, in Kirk Cousins to an Achilles injury. And now this episode is devoted to the Jaren Hall propaganda train. That's what we're going to go with here on Purple Daily on Draft. And I know Forno has been asking for this and talking about this for a long time, even before the draft, even before the Vikings drafted him out of BYU. So this kind of lays the groundwork here. And Forno was talking off mic that, like, hey, I'm excited for our Jaren Hall to start. Obviously, different circumstances. They didn't envision it happening like this, where Kirk ruptures an Achilles tendon, and now you have to basically start a rookie potentially the rest of the way. So let's go down the path here to start on Purple Daily on Draft. Hit the subscribe button for daily Vikings entertainment right here, too. Tyler Forness, Miles Gorham, Declan Goff here every Monday on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and podcast feed. So, Jaren Hall, Forno, are we ready to lean into the Jaren Hall experience? Are you excited? Can he do this? What is your kind of first thought here if Jaren Hall is indeed the starting quarterback the rest of the way for the Vikings?
Well, first, all the best wishes to Kirk Cousins and his just being able to heal and figuring it out. Like an Achilles injury is just absolutely brutal. And nobody wanted his potential Vikings tenure to end with a ruptured Achilles, nor did they want his season to end. But that's kind of the position we're in, and all the best wishes to him and the Vikings moving forward. But what we're going to do here is we're just going to try and look at what's forward. And because the past is the past and there's nothing we can do to change it, but we can change how the future looks. And that's where Jaren Hall comes in. And I have been very high on Jaren Hall. I gave him a 3rd round grade coming into the process. He has a little bit of not athletic limitations, but he doesn't have like the strongest arm, but he has a more than capable arm. And I guess in retrospect, you can kind of relate it to Kirk Cousins, where Cousins doesn't have this elite level arm, but he can zip throws in the short and intermediate windows and he can throw long. Hall struggles most when he's throwing long with accuracy, but in that like kind of like that 15 to 30 yard range, he is so good at dropping it in the bucket. What I mean is if you were to put a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket you get at Home Depot out, he's going to be able to just drop it right in there. And you see that with his receivers where it'll just drop perfectly right into their hands and arms. And that's kind of his specialty. He's great in the intermediate levels of the field. Just his last season at BYU, he had 22 big time throws, percentage of 5.5. And one of the things that's really impressive about him is he knows the offense. And one thing I keep hearing from people is like, oh, this offense is so complicated and stuff. Yeah, he's learning an NFL version of the same offense he ran in college. So it's not as if he ran like a spread and all of a sudden he's learning a real pro style offense. He ran a lot of the same concepts at BYU. They just ran them out of spread formations and they used a lot more shotgun. But he has the capability of playing under center. He has the ability to go through his progressions and make smart, calculated decisions. Problem is, the speed at which he's going through his progressions right now is not fast enough. You saw that on the strip sack where Hall found the right read. He made the right decision. He was just a little bit too slow, and the ball got knocked out of his hands before he could actually make the throw. And I think some of that is going to come with time. The best way to figure out how to process faster is by processing. So over the next 9 games, if Hall ends up starting every single one of them, it's going to be a really interesting development curve for him because he has all the talent. He has the ability. He has the mental capacity. He has the intelligence, the leadership ability. I mean, we have to remember he's 25 years old, but I consider him 23 in football years because of that 2-year Mormon mission. It's with a Mormon mission, that's all you do. You don't go out and have fun. You don't like practice football. You don't play. It is a mission. And that's what he was doing. He was spreading the word of the Book of Mormon. So His body has 2 less years of hits than a normal 25-year-old quarterback, which I think is important here. And when you put all these things together, Hall has the ability to do everything that you want for a starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. Is he going to be able to do that and sustain it? Is he going to be able to show growth? Is he going to be the future of this football team? Those are all massive questions that need a lot of variables to be figured out and answered. But if you want a guy as a mid-round pick who could potentially be a Brock Purdy, a Tom Brady, a Dak Prescott, a guy you take on day 3 that all of a sudden rises up and becomes a true starter and potential game changer for your franchise, Jaren Hall is the guy, and he's in the absolute perfect situation for him because of what this offense is, because of the infrastructure that this team has with the 2 offensive tackles, with the good offensive line, with the offensive-minded head coach and play caller, with 2 stud receivers and a stud tight end. You don't have a better situation for that guy to potentially succeed than Jaren Hall. And if he does, great. If he doesn't, you're probably going to be in position to get within shooting range of a Drake May.
All right, Miles, do you trust Jaren Hall here? So obviously Forno's pretty bullish on him, but there are some characteristics, maybe even the infrastructure around Jaren Hall is, yes, probably better than a lot of other rookie quarterbacks who have to step in and make spot starts going forward. Do you trust Jaren Hall to be the starting quarterback of the Vikings in 2023?
Well, I mean, trust is a hard word to use because I mean he's a 5th round rookie that's being kind of thrust into a situation he didn't ask for and they didn't want him to be in. So I think that's a little bit of a different scenario. Like he was never expected to even be the backup quarterback, but Nick Mullins got hurt, and so he kind of got forced into this situation. I think they wanted him to kind of redshirt this year, kind of learn, process, run through practice, do all those things that like a backup developmental quarterback should be able to do. But I mean, he seems like the type that really does want to like bury himself in the game, really learn and understand how to do things. I think he's going to lean on the leadership from the team to like get himself right. Now, the one area I think besides him being a rookie, another area I have a major concerns about is the fact that like this isn't 2019 where I think had Kirk Cousins got hurt in 2019, it might have been a little bit easier for them to find a backup quarterback to kind of fill in and kind of like play well in the offense, because that offense was predicated by the run game and play action. This offense's run game is trash. It's awful. It's one of the worst running games in the league. And on top of that, when you have a rookie quarterback, running the football is so important. And so if you can't run the football efficiently, it just puts even more onus on Jaren Hall, which makes what Kirk Cousins was doing even more impressive because the run game was so poor. But that just adds that much more pressure and like a lack of infrastructure for Jaren Hall that he shouldn't have to have. So that's, I guess, probably some of my bigger worries for him. Like he's going to make his mistakes. He's going to go through a roller coaster. You hope there's more highs than lows, but to expect him to be even Brock Purdy, I think is obviously unrealistic. It's a really tough, tall order to make. But I mean, I think he's got the skill set to at least maybe be a backup type quarterback. And so maybe this is his opportunity to really show that he could be a spot starter. Now, I don't know if he's a long-term type solution, but I think he's going to might have his opportunity to prove that. I think the one other pause I have is that Kevin O'Connell, so let me preface this by saying Kevin O'Connell yesterday was really flustered, probably going through all the emotions. They win a huge game, but also like lose their starting quarterback. But he also wasn't fully ready to commit to a Jaren Hall like long-term, like rest of the season. This is his team. We're going to ride with him. Like some other teams have done with other quarterbacks, but like the Jets with Zach Wilson, obviously draft pedigree is a little different there. But so I do wonder how they actually feel about Jaren Hall behind the scenes in terms of coming in and trying to be that starter for 9, 10, games, whatever. What is it? What are they? 4-4, so 8, so 9 games, right? So we'll see how that plays out. But it's really hard for me to be like, all right, Jaren Hall, get us to the playoffs. Like I just don't really know if I find that realistic. But to Forno's point, if he's not good enough, then that should mean that you're in striking distance to get a quarterback in the top 10. So it's kind of one of those weird scenarios that as a fan, I'm not used to, obviously with Kirk Cousins, because he's been here for 6 years and never had to worry about health, never had to worry about like the backup quarterback as much because of those reasons. But it's really tough. I've been trying to like find the words to like talk about the situation, but it just feels weird. Like there's that Teddy Bridgewater 2016 type of feeling. But this is in the middle of the season. This isn't even before the season started. So it's a little bit of an unprecedented territory for the Vikings fans that we haven't had in a while. So I've been kind of having a hard time coming up with like how to like really preface everything that's going on or like process.
Forno, do you think that the Vikings can still win games with Jaren Hall here? I mean, their defense is playing a little bit better. We obviously mentioned the infrastructure around him as well. Miles brings up that, O'Connell's a little flustered. And look, I could spend another 45 minutes on Jonathan Vilma's color commentary, not in the most positive lights. But I did agree with him when he came in that, like, why are you making him throw passes? You should probably just run the ball and try to get the hell out of Lambeau with the W. And it gets a little like, the Vikings had control of that game, but they obviously could have made it a lot easier on themselves. Do you still think the Vikings can win games? Or maybe let's just start here. Can they beat the Falcons on Sunday with Jaren Hall as their starting quarterback?
I think they can. And here's the thing. And Miles brought up an interesting point. Like, the big thing with Hall is we don't know. And there's probably a 10% chance that he is a Dak Prescott where he's a franchise quarterback. And if you take out that 10%,
it might even be lower than that, to be honest.
Like, 9 out of 10 times at least, he's not. And that's okay. A 5th round pick theoretically should be a backup that can come in and win you games when you need them to. Like a 1 or 2 game spot start. Like Dante Culpepper had like a sprained ankle a couple times when he was with the Vikings. Guess who came in? Guys like Gus Frerotte, Todd Bauman. And they came in and won games. So that should be the expectation for Hall. We expect him alone to be able to carry this team and win games? Absolutely not. And I think it's going to be interesting how Kevin O'Connell play calls for a different style of quarterback, because Hall is a dual threat. He is a lot more mobile, and you can utilize some of that stuff to your advantage. Now, how will that impact the running game? That is, I think, the biggest intrigue here, because now you can add RPOs. Now you can add like a potential like quarterback option. You can do all these different things because you have a different style quarterback. And to me, that's where the intrigue lies right now. I don't know how many games this team can win with Jaren Hall as a starting quarterback. I think the over-under is like 3.5. I think that's probably saying it fairly, considering all the other pieces around this team, considering how much improvement you're going to likely get from Jaren Hall throughout the year, and considering how good of a coaching staff this is on the offensive defensive side of the ball. I think that they'll be able to figure out enough of a game plan to make this work. Is it going to get them to the playoffs? Probably not. Let's just be real with ourselves. But you have a developmental guy. He is mature. He's intelligent. He comes from the same offensive system that they run here, that they ran in college. Let's see where it goes. And if it goes nowhere, but you know what? That's okay. You gave it a real shot, and we'll end up talking about it. But there's no sense in mortgaging your future for a guy who has to spend weeks to learn your system, and then probably won't be much of a difference maker.
So you mentioned him maybe doing RPOs, and O'Connell's kind of changed up, honestly, a lot of the play calling since Justin Jefferson's been out, which is weird because I feel like some of his best offensive games have been in this limited sample size with the best wide receiver on the sidelines with the hamstring injury. But how much, Miles, can you like change up a playbook and make it so much easier for that quarterback, but also maybe making it like more complicated for the rest of the offense? Like, I guess, what balance do you have to kind of have here, knowing that you're having a rookie quarterback who might have strengths in RPOs, but that wasn't like obviously Kirk Cousins' thing. So how much of that do you kind of have to like marry together on Sunday by the time you play Atlanta? And this is obviously assuming too that Jaren Hall is a starting quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing you got to make sure you do is obviously give him more play actions, give him a quick game. I think quick reads, something like, don't make him work through like 3 reads of 3 progressions, those types of things. Like, let him hit his back foot and get rid of the football. I think the one thing that Kevin O'Connell, we saw with him and Kirk Cousins is because of how much of a veteran and how talented Kirk Cousins was, O'Connell was able to tell him, hey, even if that first read might be there, it's okay to like peek over and see if that second read, the deeper read might be there. Like, those are things you can't do with Jaren Hall right now. You're going to have to make sure that like he can just function within the offense. And so I think you got to make things a little bit easier on him. Obviously, the run game, we talked about that earlier. The run game has to be a huge staple of what they do moving forward. This can't be a throw first football team the way it's been under Kirk Cousins, because that's just you're putting your rookie quarterback in a really tough situation if that's the plan. So I think O'Connell needs to kind of adjust some of his play calling and timing of his play calling. I think you can do plenty of things that you've already been doing with Kirk Cousins. It's just about timing and making sure that you're putting Jaren Hall in the best situation to have success and give him simpler opportunities and simpler reads. And obviously, I think O'Connell's really good at and scheming guys open. So I think that's really positive for Jaren Hall. But again, the longer developing routes, some of these things that like you could put Kirk Cousins in a situation and say, hey, you might have to, work through your full field progression like consistently the way we've seen Kirk Cousins do it. I think it's a little bit different with Jaren Hall, where you got to kind of maybe shorten the field, give him half field reads, some of those things early on, kind of as he gets going, because he has not had the reps, he hasn't had the opportunities. So I don't think you can just throw him out there on Sunday and say, hey, we're not changing the playbook. We're going to treat you like you're Kirk Cousins, because that's just not realistic, and it wouldn't be setting him up for success. So I think KOC's, besides the trade deadline being this week and them trying to figure out what to do, I also think the big thing for him is kind of to develop and getting in a room with Jaren Hall and saying, hey, here's what, tell me what works best for you, and kind of having that strong relationship, and letting guys like Sean Mannion, who's in the building. And I know Nick Mullins is out, but he's still around, and I would assume Kirk Cousins will be around a little bit depending on his surgery situation. So he's got people to lean on, to talk to help get him up to speed. But yeah, I think it's just about him and KOC really getting on a strong page together and kind of figuring out the strengths and the things he does understand and what he doesn't.
So before we get into other maybe trade deadline or situations for the Vikings, now that Kirk Cousins is obviously out for the season, Forno, does this basically guarantee that the Vikings are probably going to take a quarterback in round one? Does Jaren Hall's performance obviously hinder this a little bit? But we've hinted at this, and obviously draft position and where you are at the board obviously plays a factor too. But with Kirk Cousins' injury now, and obviously an unknown in Jaren Hall, is it more likely today that the Vikings are going to draft a quarterback early in the draft?
No. I think you could argue that it's less likely that they take quarterback in round one, and let me kind of go through that. Okay. Kirk Cousins, 35 years old, ruptured Achilles. Well, let's just be real with his free agent market. How many teams are going to want to pay a free agent quarterback that has a ruptured Achilles tendon at 35 years old? He was playing great football, but that's a really brutal injury to come back from. And there's a real chance that the Vikings could get him on even more of a discount because his market just might not be very good. And no matter how, unless Hall comes out in his Dak Prescott in his rookie season, I think it doesn't move the needle at all for if they'll take a quarterback in round one, because I think that's kind of the bar for what Hall could potentially be. You got to be rookie Dak Prescott, and you have to be able to show that kind of performance. And the thing with Prescott is he had a very similar tool set to what Hall's going to be coming in with. He had, except he was going to have a much better running back in Zeke Elliott. He had great tackles. He had really good weapons on the outside. He had a really good tight end, and he was able to maximize it. Now, Ken Hall, who knows? That's a wild card, and that's what's going to make the rest of the season enjoyable to watch, because you get to see a rookie quarterback start to work through things and figure things out. And I think the injury makes it less likely just because of what I said earlier. I think it's more likely he gets another year, because I don't think his free agent market is going to be as robust. But if there's an opportunity for them to take a guy and they want the guy, I don't think anything will stop them from actually going and get the guy. But I don't know. It's everything's so cloudy and unsure at this exact moment, just because it's so fresh. The wound is right there. And
the timing couldn't be worse for the Vikings in terms of the deadline and everything. It's unfortunate. Obviously all everything out to Kirk, nothing but the timing also from a team standpoint, they have to go through so much as well. They have to make these huge decisions within 36 hours, 48 hours essentially of each other. And a big trade just went down in the NFL. Leonard Williams from the Giants just got traded to the Seahawks for a second and a fifth. And so I wonder that, I know we're not getting down this too far, but that just made me think Danielle Hunter trades. I know it's tough, but the scenario from yesterday kind of creates this snowball effect of the things that they might not have been willing to do before the game yesterday coming into the deadline. Maybe they're more open to doing a Danielle Hunter trade for a second and a fifth type of scenario. So it's kind of just brought into my mind when I saw that flash.
I saw even Kevin O'Connell said at the podium on Monday afternoon that, quote, "You wouldn't believe some of the things on my cell phone I have received over the last 24 hours." So, yeah, it's obviously a very fluid situation. We're recording this on a Monday afternoon at a little before 2 p.m. Central Time. But, I mean, it's safe to ask this question. Do you think the Vikings should be buying or should they be selling at the trade deadline, Miles? Do you think that they should stay put? If you were Kwesi, not putting yourself in Kwesi's shoes, but if you were running the Vikings, what would you want to do here if you were in charge of making these decisions?
I think even with the Kirk Cousins injury, I think the last 2 weeks with the way this team has played, it's hard to warrant or even sell through the fact that they should be complete sellers. I think even going into yesterday before they've been playing their best football all season. I think everybody's kind of come together. The defense has looked like a really good unit. Offense obviously has been playing its best football. I don't see them becoming full on sellers. So if I was Kwesi, I don't know if I'd say full on sellers, but I would obviously be listening to everything. I'm at a point where maybe I was turning away people on Saturday, Sunday morning, all those things. And then all of a sudden, the situation that happened yesterday, I'm probably answering my phone a little bit more often and willing to hear people out for guys like KJ Osborne, Ezra Cleveland. Who else have we talked? Jordan Hicks. Jordan, those guys to me, even if Kirk Cousins hadn't got hurt, I still think those guys should have been people that you were considering moving anyways, just because they're on expiring deals. I don't think they plan to extend any of those guys. And you're in a situation where you could get draft capital while also staying competitive. But with that situation with Kirk, I think it's you're more likely should be more open to trading those guys, and the return probably doesn't have to be as high as you were hoping for it to be. Now, Danielle Hunter's situation, now to me that's a first or he's staying. It's kind of one of those scenarios. It'd be really hard to sell through to everybody else on the roster, their ownership, coaching staff. If I was Kwesi to say, we'll trade Danielle Hunter for a late second round pick or a third round pick. I just don't see that happening. So I think it's if you can get a first round pick, that's a little bit of a different scenario because of what happened yesterday to why you could warrant trading him. But I think otherwise, if you don't, then you're really not in a position to trade a guy like Danielle Hunter, who's been a focal point of your defense, who's leading the league in sacks. Really hard to sell your roster and your locker room. Hey, we know what happened to Kirk, but we also need to look out for us. And season's over, we're going to trade Hunter. The only sell through you could do there is the return was just too good to say no to. And that's kind of where I think they're at, is they need to make people say, teams need to make them say no, but they'll probably be calling a lot.
I guess I would totally take I would probably do a first round pick. I shouldn't say totally. I'd probably would do the first round pick, but honestly, if you're not going to trade them, and I don't know what the representation, is what their end game is here, but I would probably lock them up to an extension at that point, right? Forget trying to go to the off season with him maybe building up even more value, and I'm sure he's asking for a lot. He deserves a lot, but I would be in the camp of trying to extend him, right? I mean, at this point, 4-0, I don't know what you would want to do there. Obviously, a first round pick is pretty enticing. If it's even more than that, how can you not say no? But I guess what do you want to see the Vikings do to Danielle Hunter by tomorrow's deadline?
I think there's only one way the Vikings trade Danielle Hunter, and it's if this ends up being true. They get a first round pick plus, and either they don't think he's going to re-sign with the team, or they don't have him in their long-term plans. And I can't speak for the Vikings because I don't know either of those last two factors. But if you can answer those two with, yes, that's correct, then you move him. And I think that's the only reason why you would move him. If you think he's going to be a part of your long-term plans, but you just couldn't come to an agreement on a long-term deal right then, but you wanted to act in good faith and be like, okay, we're going to talk about this right when the season ends. We're going to give you your raise, which you have earned based on your on-field play, and we're going to go back to the negotiating table. And that's a good faith gesture by the Vikings that usually is reciprocated by the players. Hey, the Vikings, Hunter signed a bad contract. No, you can't argue that it was a good contract for him because weeks later, Khalil Mack beat it by $7.5 million a season. And the Vikings acted in good faith, continuing to get Hunter more money. And he ended up with about $14 million more in max value after it was all said and done with that 5-year, $72 million contract. So good faith goes somewhere with people just in a general sense. If I were the Vikings, I don't think you do any short-term rentals. I had written a couple pieces where, hey, maybe you look at some rental players that are really inexpensive. A Justin Houston for like a 6th or 7th round pick from Carolina. That could help put you over the top. You're not in that position anymore. If the Vikings are going to buy, I think it needs to be a TJ Hawkinson type move. It needs to be, I'm bringing you in because I'm going to make you a cornerstone of my franchise. Chase Young is probably the guy. If you're going to make a move, that's the move you make because you think he can be. He was drafted as a 2nd overall pick. He had 9 sacks as a rookie before an ACL basically cost him the last 2 years. You can take that guy, and he's already shown that he's back to full strength. If you put him with Danielle Hunter and then slide Marcus Davenport to 5 technique, all of a sudden you have a front that could be just monstrous moving forward. And that could really be a game changer for your defense. I think if you're going to make a move, that's what you do. The Commanders are asking for a 2nd round pick. I think you try and maneuver. You do like a 2nd and a 4th and try and get like a 3rd back, something like that. But if the Vikings are going to make a trade, it's going to be a Hawkinson type move. I don't even know if you should do it, but if they're going to, that's the only path I see forward.
Let's talk a little bit about Vikings rookie performers so far here before we get into some college football notes. I mean, Jordan Addison continues to put up pretty solid numbers. He was obviously one of the most targeted wide receivers yesterday for the Vikings as well. Right now, he has the 3rd best odds to win Rookie of the Year. It's going to be C.J. Stroud, right? Probably with the bullet at this point. Even betting wise, he's a minus 145. So he probably will lock this thing up, and it's typically is a quarterback award. But just looking at what Jordan Addison's been able to do here after kind of a rocky training camp and off the field things, he has obviously turned himself into a damn good wide receiver. I guess my question is, Miles, is what does he look like once Justin Jefferson comes back? Because he obviously had some moments with JJ on the field too, but now I think I'm getting teased by the fact of it's just going to be exactly like it is, right? Like JJ, Jordan, and Jordan Addison kind of tearing things up down the field to a degree. What have you liked about Jordan Addison, and do you still think that he can still get the same amount of targets and make the same amount of impact once Justin Jefferson comes back from injury?
I mean, elephant in the room, obviously the hardest thing there is no Kirk. So like that changes obviously the dynamic overall. But I think when Justin Jefferson comes back, all things equal, like Addison's doing everything you were hoping he could do to help create more opportunities for JJ. But also at the same time, JJ is going to do that for Addison. I think what we would see is kind of like what we saw with Diggs and Thielen, or even like Thielen and JJ. Like you have 2 dynamic receivers that can win all over the field, and you can utilize those guys and interchange them so well. I just think that's how well Addison's been able to play, especially these last few weeks when JJ went down. So I think it just adds more fire to everything you have in the passing game. And I think what Addison will be able to do is just take more snaps from KJ Osborne. And I think I don't know where JJ is in terms of like returning. Like I think he's got 1 more week left, 2 more weeks.
I think he has to miss at least 1 more game. Right?
Is it 1 more? Like this next? The Falcons game is the last one, right?
Yeah,
and he's eligible to return. So obviously don't know where he's at, but if he's in a spot where you feel like he feels good to come back, all those things, blah blah blah. Like that's why I was saying like KJ Osborne could be an opportunity to move him, because Addison has rightfully earned that role as like that number 2 guy opposite JJ, and so you have those 2 guys playing like majority of the snaps. And then you interchange Brandon Powell and those types. So, I think Addison should continue to be that like number 2 option. But he's played himself so well that he's been that number 1 option while JJ's been out, and you haven't missed a beat, and you've played really well. So like that to me just shows like how strong that duo can be long term. And then obviously TJ Hawkinson fits in there as well. So I'm just excited about those 2 kind of like tearing up the league moving forward.
Forno, on the defensive side of the ball, I believe you tweeted this out. I believe this was on the Monday night game during the Niners that you said you're ready to call Caleb Evans a damn good NFL cornerback. I'm paraphrasing there slightly. But what have you liked from him as a rookie cornerback, or not a rookie cornerback, 2nd-year cornerback here? What have you liked from his game specifically?
Well, I will say yesterday was not a great performance from Evans. That pass interference in the end zone, just not being able to get your head around quick enough. And just he just plays really smart. He plays with good leverage. He has capable enough speed to keep up with receivers, but he's not like a barn burner in that aspect, more of a long strider. And he has just knack of just being able to stay in the hip pocket and being able to knock down the ball, or at least contest it. Like, he's just turning into a very solid player. And the thing with cornerback is you don't need great. Great is awesome. It's fantastic. Just don't be a disaster. Just be capable. Like, the Bengals made the Super Bowl with 3 average corners as their top 3. As long as you don't have it's like offensive line. Just don't have a weak link. Everybody be solid. And Evans, I think, is that really solid piece. And with the emergence of Booth over the last couple weeks, and Blackman's been playing well, and you have Byron Murphy Jr., who gets targeted a lot, but he is around the football really often, and he's been able to make plays. Like, I think the Vikings have a solid cornerback room, and I wouldn't try to add to it during this trade deadline. Like, I know some have opined, that was before the Kirk Cousins injury, but like, he's a good football player. And sometimes good football players are exactly what you need. And he's on a rookie contract for 2 more seasons. And at that point, you can make a decision if you want to keep him. But he just consistently plays solid football. And that's a massive upgrade from what the Vikings have been dealing with in prior seasons.
All right, boys. Any other last notes from yesterday's Vikings game, which should have been a euphoric, like, awesome win, right? You kicked the Packers' ass. You beat them by 2 scores for the first time in 4 years. Like I said, from off the jump last week, we were just assuming a Vikings loss against the Niners. They stunned them. Then they beat the Packers. Here they are, 4-4. Before we get to any college football takeaways, Miles, anything else that stood out to you from the Vikings side of things yesterday or even during the Niners game?
It's not like young guy related, but like Josh Metellus, I think, has just been a relation. Like, for them to be able to recognize him as like that like core, like nickel, like a big linebacker, like small linebacker, like type hybrid player, and him to be able to play and take like that interception yesterday was really impressive. It kind of reminded me of like the Addison Charvarius Ward situation from Monday night, where like I thought Reed was going to take that ball away and was going to like have a huge catch, and all of a sudden I'll see Mattel strip the ball away like the way Ward probably should have against Addison. So it's kind of like a reverse scenario, but went the Vikings' way. I think Metellus has been all over the field, and I think his ability, like, there's times he gets beat. That's going to happen. I think he's still learning on the fly, but I just think he's played really good football for this defense, and it's been really important for the ability for this defense to kind of transcend and get back to being even an average unit. And I think he's a big part of that.
All right, Fono, college football takeaways from another action-packed weekend on Saturday. What did you? Who stood out to you? What teams? What players did you notice yesterday? I know we talked about Bo Nix off the microphone, who I know that 35-year-old quarterback basically in college football. I'm just kidding. What did you notice from the college football side of things over the weekend?
Listen, I want to start with Washington. They struggled against a really tough Stanford team, and Stanford has played teams very, very tough so far this year. They even got a big upset. I can't remember who it was over a couple weeks ago, but it was Washington State. They've been playing really good football, and they took Washington to the limit. Washington has had a couple rough games the past 2 weeks, but they've also been dealing with a really big flu bug, as you saw go around the NFL this past weekend. Guys were popping up on the injury report. Kenny Nwangwu mysteriously appeared on Friday and then was out. Same thing happened to DJ Wanham against the Dolphins last year. Patrick Mahomes said he had an illness, and then he just played an absolutely very poor game against the Denver Broncos. Like, the flu's just been kind of going around. It's that season. My wife's a pharmacist. She'll tell you, get your flu shot. When we eventually have kids, I have to get a flu shot in order to even see my kid. Like, that's how serious she is about it. So it's one of those things, and Washington got hit hard from everybody who covers the team that I talked to, and they struggled. But Michael Penix Jr., favorite to win the Heisman. I don't think that should change. And they have a couple really big games coming up. They're against USC this weekend, which is going to be a really, really fun matchup. USC's defense is an abomination. It is absolutely atrocious. Alex Grinch still having a job as a defensive coordinator in the Power 5 is one of the more baffling things I've seen in college football in recent years, other than Iowa's offense. Because, I mean, everybody knows about Iowa's offense. Their offensive coordinator is apparently done after the season, which is a huge benefit to them. But we'll see how Kirk Ferentz treats the new guy when they're not his son. So that'll be interesting. But college football, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. And I'll say this, Georgia might be the most boring number 1 seed, number 1 overall team I've ever watched. They're just really good, they're not even like fun to watch. They're just really efficient and effective on both sides of the football. And they're just able to get it done. They don't have nearly the amount of star powers they had the past couple of years, but they're just playing well and doing the thing. So they could be in line for a third straight national championship. But if there are a couple teams who could potentially play spoiler for them, and the latter part of the season is going to be a lot of fun to watch for that reason. Also, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, Kansas, beating the bad Dylan Gabriel and Oklahoma squad. The Oklahoma squad isn't bad. Dylan Gabriel is, though. That was a fun football game. And the Big 12 conference championship race, because no divisions. It's just the top two teams. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch down the stretch.
Yeah, just looking even at like FanDuel's national championship odds, like Michigan and Georgia have the best at plus 250, but then Florida State's plus 550, Ohio State's plus 700, and then it drops off a little bit to Oregon and Bama, who are 1,400 and 1,600 respectively. It seems like there just isn't a dominant dog in the race, and probably that's for a pun intended there for Georgia, but it seems like it's completely wide open here, and I'm excited to watch that play out too. So. Going to be a blast, man. I'm jacked to watch this college football season play out. I do next week. I want to ask you, Forno, this is a tease and a spoiler, I guess. We haven't talked anything about, I believe, Riley Leonard at Duke, have we, on this show? Have we talked Riley Leonard at all?
He's like Daniel Jones, but slightly better. I just don't think he's a guy you can really rely on as a potential pro prospect. The idea of him is better than the performance. Plus, he's basically been dealing with an ankle for the past 4 weeks, so we really haven't seen much of him at all. He re-injured it against Florida State when they were ahead in that game, and they ended up losing. But like, we can talk about him, but I really don't think there's a ton to be excited about. He's probably going to go back next year. I'm guessing he'll transfer and try to get a better offense in the P5 because Mike Elko is a very defensive-minded coach, and you just don't have the weapons at Duke that you're going to have at other schools. And maybe see if he can raise his pro stock at that point. But I just think he's effective. He's efficient. He's a dual threat, but there's really nothing exceptional or special about him.
Well, let's put a pin in that for next week, and we can get into more of those questions. And obviously, if you guys want any of us to talk about anything, let us know on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. The Score North app, too, is a central hub that I see feedback coming in through as well. So hit us up. This is Purple Daily on Draft every Monday. Yes, sir.
How do we not talk about the first place in the Big Ten West? Minnesota Gophers.
Oh yeah, my God. Oh Jesus.
Then it'll go away.
Good.
I just had to add that. I was trying to add that earlier. Yeah, like if they had beat Northwestern, I think I would at least be like, okay, there's like a chance they could win the Big Ten West. But like, yeah, I just thought that was funny. Like we didn't talk about. They're leading the Big Ten West. Like,
if Iowa loses one more game and Minnesota sweeps outside of the Ohio State game, they'll go to Indianapolis and get smoked by Michigan again.
Wouldn't that be wild? Though, like they're one of their worst seasons under PJ Fleck, and they still might win the Big Ten West.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's an awful brand of football. It really is just the grind to get to even 13 points, not even 10 points. So yeah, it's been tough. So no, a good parting shot there, Miles. Not a bad one at all. I don't roll the boat necessarily. I root for their success, but it's going to be fun to watch them potentially play in the Big Ten West for sure. All right, fellas. Miles Gorham, Tyler Fornes here, Declan Goff, Purple Daily on Draft every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.